A homeless man shared his last dollar with a crying girl, unaware she was the billionaire's missing daughter. The moment hung suspended in the cool autumn air as Daniel reached into his worn pocket, fingers trembling slightly, and pressed the crumpled bill into her small palm. It was all he had left in the world, but something about her quiet sobs on the park bench had shattered what little remained of his defenses. "Hey kiddo, it's gonna be okay," he said, his voice rough from disuse. The girl couldn't be more than 12, huddled in a jacket too thin for the October chill, tears cutting clean tracks down her dirt-smudged face. She looked up with startled eyes the color of summer rain. "Why would you need this more than me?" Daniel shrugged, his shoulders heavy beneath his layered clothes. "Maybe, but right now, you need something to believe in more than I need a dollar." The girl, Eliza, though Daniel wouldn't learn her name until much later, clutched the dollar bill like it was something precious. In that moment, neither could have possibly known how that single act of kindness would alter the course of both their lives forever. The cold had settled deep into Daniel's bones long before the first snow fell. 3 years on the streets had taught him to recognize the warning signs. The numbness in his fingertips, the persistent cough that rattled his chest each morning. Winter was coming, and this one promised to be cruel. He hunched deeper into the doorway that had become his nightly shelter, pulling the tattered sleeping bag tighter around his shoulders. 5 blocks away, the financial district glittered with light and promise. A world he had once belonged to. Now it might as well have been another planet. The memories came unwelcome in the darkness. The investment firm. The promotion. Sarah's smile when he'd brought home champagne to celebrate. Then the market crash. The scandal. The colleagues who'd used him as a scapegoat while they escaped with golden parachutes. The trial. The headlines. The slow, excruciating loss of everything. Career, savings, home, marriage. His fingers absently traced the faded business card in his pocket. Harrington Financial Group, Daniel Wells, Senior Investment Advisor. He kept it as a reminder of how quickly everything could vanish, how easily a man could become invisible to the very society he once navigated with confidence. Morning arrived with a sharp kick to his side. "Move along," the security guard barked. "The owner's coming by today." "Can't have you here." Daniel gathered his few possessions with practiced efficiency. Once, such treatment would have filled him with shame and rage. Now he felt only a dull resignation. This was the rhythm of his days: move, search for food, find shelter, repeat. Human connection had become a luxury he couldn't afford, each interaction loaded with the potential for humiliation or danger, which was why his encounter with the crying girl 3 days ago remained lodged in his mind like a splinter. Something in her eyes, something lost and broken but not yet defeated, had reflected his own soul back at him. For one brief moment, giving away his last dollar had made him feel human again. By midday, hunger drove him to the community center on 8th Street, where volunteers served lunch on Tuesdays. He kept his eyes down as he accepted a sandwich and soup, murmuring thanks. The volunteers meant well, but their pity was its own kind of burden. "You're Daniel, right?" He looked up, startled to hear his name. A woman with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair stood before him. "Margaret," she said. "We've met before. I coordinate the shelter program." He nodded vaguely, searching his memory. "There's a storm coming tonight," she continued. "We're opening the emergency beds early. You should come by." "Thanks," he said, the word feeling stiff and unfamiliar. "I'll be fine." Margaret's expression softened. "Everyone needs help sometimes, Daniel. Even you." He looked away, uncomfortable with her perception. The sandwich suddenly tasted like ash in his mouth. The promised storm arrived with biblical fury just after sunset. Rain lashed the streets in horizontal sheets while wind howled through the concrete canyons of downtown. Daniel had found temporary refuge in the bus station, but the security guards were making increasingly hostile rounds. When the guards weren't looking, he slipped out into the deluge. The rain soaked through his layers in seconds. He trudged toward the shelter, each step a battle against the wind, when a flash of movement caught his eye. There, huddled beneath the awning of a closed cafe, was the girl from the park. Her thin jacket was plastered to her small frame, her dark hair hanging in wet ropes around her face. Daniel hesitated. Every instinct for self-preservation told him to keep walking. Getting involved meant complications, and complications were dangerous when you lived on the society's razor edge. But something stronger than instinct turned his feet toward her. "Hey," he called over the storm's roar. "You shouldn't be out here." She looked up, recognition flashing across her face. "Dollar man." Despite everything, he felt his lips twitch. "That's me. Worry." Where are your parents? Her expression shuddered. Don't have any. Daniel had heard enough stories on the streets to recognize a runaway. The smart move would be to call the police, let them handle it. But the terror that flickered in her eyes at his prolonged silence told him everything he needed to know about how she'd respond to authorities. There's a shelter a few blocks from here, he said instead. Warm beds, hot food. Better than drowning out here. She hugged her knees tighter. They'll ask questions. Probably. The rain streamed down his face. But hypothermia asked harder ones. A crack of thunder punctuated his words, making them both flinch. The girl looked up at the black sky, then back at Daniel, calculating her options. I'm Eliza, she finally said. Daniel, if they try to call social services, I'm gone, she warned. Fair enough. He extended his hand. After a moment's hesitation, she took it. They arrived at the shelter looking like they'd swum there. Margaret took one look at them and immediately went into action, dispatching volunteers for towels and dry clothes without asking the questions that clearly burned on her tongue. We're almost at capacity, she told Daniel as she handed him a steaming cup of coffee. But we have a small room in the back. It's not much, but you two won't have to be in the main dormitory. We're not, Daniel began. She's not my kid, he clarified, suddenly aware of how it might look. Margaret's expression remained neutral. I didn't assume she was. But she clearly trusts you, and right now that's what matters. Daniel glanced over to where Eliza sat wrapped in a blanket, cradling her own cup of hot chocolate. She did look at him differently than she watched the others, with cautious trust rather than wary suspicion. She's a runaway, he said quietly. I don't know her story yet. Margaret nodded. One night of safety first. Stories can wait. The small room had 2 cots with clean sheets and a space heater that filled the space with blessed warmth. Eliza took the cot furthest from the door, curling into a protective ball even in sleep. Daniel lay awake, listening to the storm rage outside and the girl's steady breathing within. For the first time in 3 years, he had a responsibility beyond his own survival. The realization should have terrified him. Instead, it anchored him to the moment in a way nothing had since he'd lost everything. Morning light filtered through the room's small window when Daniel woke to find Eliza already up, perched on the edge of her cot and studying him. You didn't leave, she observed. Neither did you, he countered. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. Still raining. It was the beginning of an uneasy alliance. Over breakfast in the shelter's common room, they circled each other with careful questions. He learned she was 11, not 12 as he'd guessed. She'd been away from home for nearly 2 weeks. No, she wouldn't say from where. No, there was no one looking for her. At least no one she wanted to find her. In turn, he offered carefully edited versions of his own truths. Former financial advisor, economic downturn, bad luck. He omitted the allegations of fraud that had been dismissed only after his reputation and career lay in ruins. So we're both hiding, she concluded with the brutal clarity of youth. Daniel couldn't argue with her assessment. They parted ways after breakfast. He to search for day labor at the construction site that sometimes hired without asking for ID, she to wherever she spent her days. But before she left, she made him promise to meet her at the park bench where they'd first met. Why? He asked. She shrugged, suddenly looking her age. Just because. He found himself at the bench at the appointed hour, surprising himself as much as anyone. She appeared minutes later, carrying a paper bag that she thrust toward him without ceremony. What's this? Food, she said as if it were obvious. From the church pantry on 5th. They don't ask as many questions as the shelter people. Inside the bag was a peanut butter sandwich, an apple, and a juice box. A child's lunch shared with the solemnity of a sacred offering. Thank you, he said, the words catching in his throat. She sat beside him, kicking her legs. You gave me your last dollar. I remembered what that feels like. They ate in companionable silence, watching the park slowly empty as evening approached. When Daniel offered to walk her back to the shelter, she shook her head. I have a place, she said vaguely. But I'll see you tomorrow. Same time? He should have said no. Should have explained that attachment was a luxury for people with futures, not for a homeless ex-con and a runaway child. Instead, he heard himself say, I'll be here, and so began their unlikely routine. Each day, they would meet at the park bench. Some days she brought food. Other days, when Daniel had managed to earn a few dollars, he would bring treats, a chocolate bar split between them, hot drinks when the weather turned colder. They rarely spoke of their past, focusing instead on the small details of their days. Daniel learned that Eliza loved libraries. They're warm and nobody bothers you if you're quiet. and that she could recite entire passages from fantasy novels she'd read. She had a sharp mind for numbers and an even sharper eye for human nature. "That man's pretending to read the newspaper," she once whispered, nodding toward a well-dressed businessman on a nearby bench. "He's actually watching the woman with the red coat." Daniel followed her gaze and recognized the subtle surveillance techniques he'd seen corporate investigators use. "You notice a lot." "I have to," she said simply. As November deepened toward winter, Daniel found himself worrying about where Eliza spent her nights. The temperature was dropping dangerously low, and the thought of her alone in some abandoned building gnawed at him. But each time he pressed, she deflected with practiced ease. It was during the season's first snowfall that everything changed. Daniel arrived at their bench to find it empty and already dusted with white. He waited as minutes stretched into an hour, the cold seeping through his threadbare gloves. Eliza had never missed their meeting before. Concern finally drove him to his feet. He had no way to find her. No phone number, no address, not even a last name. The realization of how little he actually knew about this child who had become important to him struck like a physical blow. He was about to leave when he spotted her hurrying across the park, limping slightly and clutching her side. "I'm sorry I'm late," she gasped, her breath clouding in the frigid air. Daniel took in her split lip and the way she winced when she breathed. "What happened?" "Nothing. I fell." The lie came too quickly, too practiced. "Eliza." His tone made her look up, really look at him. Whatever she saw in his face made her shoulders slump. "Some guys found my sleeping spot," she admitted. "Said I was trespassing. They took my backpack with all my stuff." Rage bloomed hot and sudden in Daniel's chest. "Where?" She shook her head. "Doesn't matter. I'm not going back there." "Where will you go tonight?" Eliza stared at the snow gathering on her shoes. "I don't know yet." The decision crystallized in Daniel's mind with startling clarity. "The shelter. We'll both go, and tomorrow we'll figure something out." "The second, they'll call social services," she protested, panic edging her voice. "Not if we talk to Margaret first," Daniel said with more confidence than he felt. "Trust me, Eliza." "Please." The please did it. She nodded once, a quick jerky movement, and allowed him to guide her through the thickening snow toward the shelter. Margaret took one look at Eliza's face and ushered them into her small office without comment. Only when the door closed did she ask, "Who did this?" "Some men who objected to her choice of sleeping location," Daniel answered when Eliza remained silent. "Margaret, she needs a safe place, but she's scared of being put back into a system that..." He glanced at Eliza, realizing he was making assumptions. "That didn't protect me before," Eliza finished quietly. Margaret's eyes softened. "I understand, but there are rules, protocols." "Please," Daniel interrupted. "Just for a few days until we figure something out. She's not safe out there." Margaret studied them both for a long moment. "Huitunum. 3 days," she finally said. "That's how long I can reasonably delay reporting without putting my own job at risk. After that, we talk about real solutions." Relief washed through Daniel. "Thank you." Later, after Eliza had been examined by the volunteer nurse and given pain medication for her bruised ribs, they sat in the small back room that was becoming strangely like home. "Why are you helping me?" Eliza asked suddenly. "You barely know me." Daniel considered her question carefully. "Because someone should have helped me when I needed it," he finally said. "And because you remind me that I'm still capable of being more than just this." He gestured vaguely at himself, at what he'd become. Eliza nodded as if his answer made perfect sense. "My mother died when I was 7, she offered unexpectedly. "Hereditary cancer. My father, Chun Chishur, changed after that. He buried himself in work. I barely saw him." Daniel remained perfectly still, afraid any movement might stop this rare glimpse into her past. "He sent me to boarding schools. When I was home, it was all tutors and nannies. The last one," her voice faltered. "She wasn't nice. When I told my father, he didn't believe me. Said I was making up stories for attention." Daniel's hands curled into fists. "So you ran?" She nodded. "I took some cash from his safe. Enough to last a while, I thought. But things cost more than I expected." A bitter smile twisted her lips. "That's why I was crying that day you found me. I just spent my last 20 on food that someone stole while I was in the bathroom. Your father must be looking for you." Her laugh held no humor. "I doubt he even notices I'm gone. His assistant probably handles everything. Arrange a search, Diane. The child is being difficult again." Her impression of a bored, wealthy man was unnervingly accurate. Daniel wanted to assure her she was wrong, that any father would be frantic, but he'd seen enough of the world's cruelty to know better. I'm sorry, Eliza. She shrugged, the gesture too adult for her small shoulders. It doesn't matter. I'm never going back. The next morning, Daniel woke with renewed purpose. They had 3 days before Margaret would be forced to report Eliza's situation. 3 days to find a solution that didn't involve returning her to a neglectful father or throwing her into the foster care system. It was a nearly impossible task for a homeless man with a criminal record, but for the first time in years, Daniel felt the stirring of his old problem-solving skills. I need to find work, he told Margaret. Something steady with actual paychecks. She regarded him thoughtfully. That won't be easy with your background. I know, but I have to try. Margaret tapped her pen against her desk. I might know someone. He runs a landscaping business, needs help with bookkeeping. It's not financial advising, but it's honest work. Daniel finished. That's all that matters. While Daniel went to meet Margaret's contact, Eliza spent the day at the shelter, helping sort clothing donations. When he returned that evening, the news was cautiously optimistic. He's willing to give me a chance, Daniel explained. Part-time at first under the table, but if it works out, that's great, Eliza said. But her enthusiasm couldn't hide the uncertainty in her eyes. They both knew a part-time bookkeeping job wouldn't create the stable home environment she needed. On the second day, Daniel worked his first shift at Green Horizon Landscaping. The owner, Mike, was a straightforward man who cared more about Daniel's ability to organize his chaotic accounts than about his past. Margaret vouched for you, he said simply. That's good enough for me. By the end of the day, Daniel had already saved Mike hundreds of dollars by identifying billing errors and redundant expenses. It felt good to use his mind again, to remember that he was more than his circumstances. He returned to the shelter to find Eliza deep in conversation with Margaret. They fell silent when he entered, exchanging a look he couldn't interpret. What's going on? He asked. Margaret sighed. I've been making calls, looking for options. There's a good foster family I know, experienced with trauma cases. They could take Eliza temporarily while we... No. Eliza's voice was flat. I told you. No system. Eliza, honey, you need a stable home. School, I need not to be treated like a problem to solve. She stood abruptly, fists clenched at her sides. I thought you understood. Daniel stepped between them. Let's all take a breath. Margaret's trying to help, Eliza. By sending me to strangers? How is that helping? Tears welled in her eyes. I thought maybe you... The unfinished sentence hung in the air. Daniel felt his heart constrict as he realized what she'd been hoping. That somehow he could be her solution. Eliza, he said gently, I don't even have a home. I can barely take care of myself right now, let alone... Forget it. She cut him off. It was stupid. I'm stupid. Before either adult could react, she bolted from the room. Daniel moved to follow, but Margaret caught his arm. Give her a minute. This is a lot for a child to process. I can't be what she needs, Daniel said, the words tasting bitter. I want to be, but I can't. Margaret's expression softened. Sometimes just wanting to is more than many children ever get. The third day and their deadline dawned cold and clear. Daniel rose early, his mind racing with half-formed plans, none of them viable. When he went to check on Eliza, he found her bed empty, the window slightly ajar. Panic seized him. She's gone. Margaret helped organize a search. Volunteers from the shelter fanned out across the neighborhood, checking Eliza's known haunts, the library, the park, the church pantry. Daniel retraced every step of their shared routines, growing more desperate with each empty location. By afternoon, he returned to their park bench, collapsing onto it in defeat. The temperature was dropping rapidly as the sun began to set. If they didn't find her soon... Excuse me. Daniel looked up to find a tall man in an expensive overcoat standing before him. Everything about him radiated wealth and authority, from his tailored suit to his polished shoes. I'm looking for someone. The man continued, his voice carrying the crisp edges of privilege. A young girl, 11 years old. Dark hair, blue eyes. Daniel's instincts flared. Why are you looking for her? The man's expression tightened. Because she's my daughter. Understanding crashed over Daniel like a wave. The expensive boarding schools. The safe full of cash. The assistant named Diane. This wasn't just any wealthy father. This was Eliza's father. The billionaire she'd run away from. You're Alexander Reed, Daniel said slowly, recognition dawning. The name had been splashed across financial news for years. Tech mogul, investment genius, philanthropist. Reed's eyebrows rose slightly. You have me at a disadvantage. Daniel Wells. He didn't offer his hand. How did you find this bench? Security footage from nearby businesses showed my daughter meeting someone here repeatedly. You. Reed's eyes narrowed. Where is she? Daniel stood, forcing Reed to take a step back. Despite his shabby appearance, Daniel still had several inches on the billionaire. Before I tell you anything, I need to know why she ran away. Reed's face flushed with anger. That's none of your concern. If you've harmed her in any way, she said her nanny was abusing her. Daniel interrupted coldly. She said when she told you, you accused her of making it up. The color drained from Reed's face. For the first time, he seemed to really look at Daniel. Not as a homeless man, but as a human being. She told you that? She also said you probably wouldn't even notice she was gone. Reed flinched as if struck. He looked away, his gaze falling on the empty playground across the path. I deserve that, he said quietly. But you're wrong about one thing. I've had private investigators searching for her since the day she disappeared. I've barely slept. I've been out of my mind with worry. Then why didn't you believe her about the nanny? Reed's shoulders sagged. Because I didn't want to believe I'd put my daughter in danger. Because it was easier to think she was acting out than to face my own failure. He looked back at Daniel, his composure cracking. Please, if you know where she is, tell me. I just want to make sure she's safe. Daniel studied the man before him. Beneath the trappings of wealth, he saw something unexpected. Genuine fear and remorse. It was the look of a parent who had made terrible mistakes but desperately wanted to fix them. I don't know where she is right now, Daniel admitted. She ran away from the shelter this morning. We've been searching all day. Alarm sharpened Reed's features. It's going to be below freezing tonight. I know. Daniel hesitated, then made a decision. I'll help you find her. But when we do, you need to listen to her. Really listen? Reed nodded solemnly. I will. They formed an unlikely search party. The billionaire and the homeless man, united by concern for the same child. Reed called off his private investigators, intuiting that their presence would only drive Eliza deeper into hiding. Instead, he followed Daniel's lead, checking places only someone who knew Eliza's habits would think to look. As night fell and the temperature plummeted, Daniel remembered something Eliza had mentioned weeks ago, an abandoned boathouse by the river where she'd sometimes go to read. It's peaceful there, she'd said. You can hear the water. I know where she might be, he told Reed. The boathouse stood dark and silent at the river's edge, its weathered boards silvered by moonlight. Daniel approached slowly, calling Eliza's name softly. His small voice answered from within. Daniel? Relief flooded through him. It's me. You had us worried. She appeared in the doorway, huddled in her jacket, face pale in the darkness. I'm sorry. I just needed to think and... She froze, spotting Reed standing a few paces behind Daniel. No. Eliza, wait. Daniel began, but she was already retreating back into the boathouse. You brought him here? I trusted you. The betrayal in her voice cut deeper than any knife. Daniel moved forward, stopping at the threshold. I didn't bring him to hurt you. I brought him because he's been looking for you. Because he's worried about you. He doesn't care about me, she shouted, her voice breaking. He never has. That's not true, Reed said, stepping forward. In the moonlight, his expensive coat and tailored pants seemed incongruous, but the pain on his face was utterly human. I've always cared, Eliza. I just didn't know how to show it after your mother died. You sent me away, she accused. I did, he acknowledged. Because looking at you hurt too much. You have her eyes, her smile. Every time I saw you, I remembered what I'd lost. He took another step closer. It was selfish and cowardly, and I'm sorry. Eliza stood rigid, tears streaming down her face. You didn't believe me about Miss Winters. Reed's face contorted with shame. I fired her the day after you left. I found proof you were telling the truth. He swallowed hard. I should have trusted you. Should have protected you. I failed you, Eliza, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to make that right, if you'll let me. For a long moment, the only sound was the gentle lapping of river water against the pilings. Then Eliza launched herself forward, colliding with her father with such force that he staggered back. His arms closed around her as she sobbed against his chest. Daniel watched, his throat tight with emotion. He should leave them to their reunion, slip away unnoticed. This wasn't his moment, and yet his feet remained rooted to the spot. After what seemed like hours but was probably only minutes, Eliza pulled back, wiping her eyes. Daniel gave me his last $1, she told her father. He didn't have to, but he did. And then he helped me even though it was hard for him. Reed looked over his daughter's head to meet Daniel's eyes. I know. I owe him a debt I can never repay. You don't owe me anything, Daniel said automatically. I disagree. Reed kept one arm around Eliza as he turned fully toward Daniel. You did what I failed to do. You saw my daughter's worth and protected her when she was vulnerable. Let me help you the way you helped her. Daniel shook his head. I didn't help Eliza to get something in return. I know that, Reed said simply. That's precisely why you deserve the help. In the days that followed, Daniel found himself caught in a whirlwind of change. Alexander Reed was a man accustomed to making things happen, and once he decided to help Daniel, there was no stopping him. First came an apartment, small but clean, with actual furniture and a working kitchen. Then a proper job offer at one of Reed's subsidiary companies, utilizing Daniel's financial background, but at a level that wouldn't trigger regulatory concerns about his past. It's not charity, Reed insisted when Daniel tried to refuse. It's an investment in someone who's proven their character. Besides, my financial team could use someone who understands both sides of the economic divide. Most importantly, there were regular visits from Eliza. She and her father were working through their issues with family therapy, rebuilding their relationship one difficult conversation at a time. Reed had moved her from boarding school to a day school in the city, and he had rearranged his schedule to have dinner with her every night. He's really trying, she told Daniel during one of their walks in the park. Now a tradition rather than a necessity. Sometimes it's still awkward, but it's better. I'm glad, Daniel said, meaning it. Eliza kicked at a pile of leaves. He says I saved him, you know. That looking for me made him realize how empty his life had become. She glanced up at Daniel. But I think you saved both of us. Daniel shook his head. You saved yourself, Eliza. I just happened to be at the right bench at the right time. With the right dollar, she added with a small smile. 1 year later, Daniel stood in front of a room full of people at the opening of the Reed Foundation's newest initiative, a comprehensive program providing housing, employment training, and mental health services to homeless individuals. Alexander Reed had created it with Daniel's guidance, incorporating insights only someone who had lived on the streets could provide. A single act of kindness can change everything, Daniel told the assembled donors and reporters. Not because $1 solves homelessness or fixes a broken system, but because it reconnects us to our shared humanity. When I gave that dollar, I wasn't just helping a crying girl. I was reminding myself that I still mattered, that I could still make a difference, however small. In the front row, Eliza beamed up at him, her father's arm around her shoulders. She was taller now, healthier, her eyes bright with the security of knowing she was both seen and loved. Later, as the three of them walked together through the crisp autumn air, Eliza linked her arms through both men's. Do you think Mom would be proud? She asked her father softly. Alexander Reed looked down at his daughter, then across at Daniel, the homeless man who had shared his last dollar and changed their lives forever. I know she would be, he said. Of both of you, Daniel felt something long broken within him finally heal as they continued their walk, connected by an invisible thread woven from loss, kindness, and second chances. A thread stronger than any fortune, more valuable than any dollar.